World War II. We know how the British, the Soviet Union, and eventually America and all the Allied powers came together to defeat the rise of fascism. But many attribute the monumental financial and material assistance of the United States as the reason the USSR held out against the Germans, why Britain could defend itself successfully, and why North Africa was the beginning of the end for Italy and Germany's armies.
Meanwhile, the victorious Eighth Army, smashing through on the bleak battlefields of Egypt, had struck a blow at Nazi strength in Africa, Nazi prestige in Germany and all Europe that will take some explaining in the Reich.
But what if the United States didn't help the Allies? What if there was a concerted effort by the Nazis to keep America out of the war and perhaps even assist the Axis powers? This is History Unfolded. To start off, we must acknowledge the elephant in the room. America and fascism simply don't mix. Today, with the legacy of America's involvement in World War II, it would be impossible to ever see them joining forces with the Nazis. Right? Right? Well, whilst that's true today, back in 1933 it wasn't such a sure thing. You know the Ford Mustangs that drive around on the road started by the famous Henry Ford? Yeah, he built cars for the Nazis. The American diplomat to the UK in 1938, Joseph P. Kennedy, he was a supposed Nazi sympathizer. Charles Lindbergh, a leading figure in the America First Committee, a group that had Nazi sympathizers officially within their ranks. These were figures that, had they been pointed in a different direction, could have influenced the US in a way that would have changed the world. Given these historical figures' influences, how might the Nazis have leveraged this to sway Americans? Well, there's a couple of ways they could have gone about it. But before we get there, we have to ask you something. Do you like these kinds of videos? If you do, please help us out and click the like button, ring that bell, and subscribe for more epic what-if videos like this. On with the nefarious schemes. So first off, what could have been done to get America, if not on Germany's side, to at least sit out the war and not help the Allies? Well, here's a couple of ways they could have done it. First off, using influential figures, sympathetic politicians, and celebrities, they would begin to push some propaganda that would speak to the average American.
In the great financial crash of the early 30s, Americans learned in a wounded bewilderment how fleeting a thing is security and how far from the frontier they had come.
Coming out of the Great Depression, they would showcase the economic success of Germany's regime in getting its people out of there, implying that its policies were way better than that of America's at the time. Germany would also work on building trade relationships with American companies. This would create a strong economic bond, helping a lot of Americans recover from the Great Depression. Once this positive image was more or less imprinted on the public psyche, the next step would be to either use or create media outlets that would subtly promote Nazi ideology through newspapers, radio, and even film, focusing on shared cultural values, that being national pride, family values, and images of a strong, unified nation. This would eventually lead to cultural exchanges where German art, music, and science showed a sterilized version of the Nazi ideology, one acceptable to Americans. In the next phase, after establishing economic ties and cultural exchanges, and once the media was on their side, the stage would be set for the Nazis to directly impact American politics by recruitment and political lobbying. With the Nazi name no longer a scary thing to Americans, some people would be recruited, and eventually lobbying and infiltration into political parties could begin, slowly influencing and supporting those politicians who were sympathetic to the Nazi cause. Funding is everything in politics after all, and during this time they would push anti-communism, which was already strong in America, and make the Nazis out to be the main defenders against it. This would go over very well with the average American. Once they've got the politicians in their pocket, the next phase would involve cementing public support through finding influential figures or celebrities even to endorse them for financial gain or other incentives. They could even create youth movements promoting American values like patriotism, discipline, and anti-communism. Another method of garnering public support would be showcasing the Nazi labor policies that at this point would have helped thousands of families out of debt and given them jobs. This would be very attractive to those who had been rescued from the Great Depression by the Nazis. Let's not forget what would also be present would be the shadier side of things. For instance, espionage, finding dirt on political opponents, not to mention assassinations of prominent opposition members. Nothing is beyond the Nazis to further their agenda. All of these tactics combined could have created a very different America by the outbreak of World War II, leading to our alternate universe where the Nazis used the 6 years before the Second World War to build up healthy relations with America on all fronts. And by the time the war rolls around, this is where things would diverge heavily from our timeline. And what if these strategies had truly changed American hearts and minds? As the war begins, Poland falls and France and England are wary of Germany. And same as in our timeline, the stunning 6-week victory of France ensues after. However, instead of supporting the Allies, America and Germany continue trade, with America vowing neutrality. In the interest of neutrality and keeping America out of the war, influences from the Nazis in America would likely push for increased economic ties with Germany, or at the very least staying out of the war completely. This would be an increasing pattern as the war wears on, and since there's money to be made from the war, along with the infiltration of America by the Nazis, there would be an increasing pressure to not just remain neutral, but perhaps even provide aid or material support. But even at the very least, if America stays out of the war, things change drastically. If you don't know this, one of the greatest factors to why the Allies won World War II in the first place, why Russia survived the Nazis, and why Great Britain resisted Germany successfully was because of the Lend-Lease Act, which granted Britain and eventually the Soviet Union US military aid to other nations. This is where the Allies' trucks, food, oil, weapons, and ammo were given to them without even needing to pay the United States right away. Without this, the situation changes completely. Great Britain's industrial capacity, whilst no pushover, was far from being able to resist the German advance all by itself. The British were also spread thin, with forces in North Africa as well as other theatres of war, trying to resist the advance of the Axis powers with other allied nations. Russia, on the other hand, had an incredibly powerful industrial capacity, but very poor quality, and due to communism, its people were starving. Without American and British trucks, oil and food supplies, and also being the sole threat Germany would contend against, the likelihood of Russia surviving by itself was slim. This doesn't even take into account that Japan, a key player, would easily have been able to overrun China, since Allied assistance would be fleeting, and they would be able to assist the Axis powers in their assault of Russia. This would mean that Russia would effectively be doomed. No matter how many bodies it threw at the enemy, it would eventually run out and need to surrender. The likely outcome in this scenario? Britain would sue for peace, the loss of life being harrowing for its citizens. Germany and its allies would have conquered all of Europe, solidifying Nazi Germany's rise to power and establishing the Third Reich. Without American embargoes on oil and steel, Japan would have little reason to attack them, and if Germany played its cards right, could even have established an alliance between Japan and the US. With Europe under Nazi control and America as an ally or neutral party at least, the post-war world would look vastly different. This leaves Africa up for grabs between the powers, with its copious amounts of natural resources. Perhaps it would have been divided up politically between the Axis powers, or maybe Africa would be the catalyst for the new Cold War. Well, that's a story for another time though. If America decided to assist Germany with materials, oil and food, there's no question the Allies would lose the war so quickly it would seem like child's play. Can you imagine the American P-51 Mustang fighters flying alongside Messerschmitt 262 jets fighting British Spitfires, or German Tiger tanks and American Shermans facing off together against Russian T-34s? A scary thought indeed. The world would look completely different, with America, Japan and Greater Germany being the main players in this new power struggle. Would you like to see us do a video in this hypothetical world, seeing what the world might look like and how technology might develop? Let us know in the comments and we'll make it happen. Do you think this what-if scenario is plausible? Do you think that the Nazis' nefarious schemes might have worked in our world? Let us know in the comments down below. We love to hear from you. Speaking of Nazi Germany, have you seen our video on what might have happened if Hitler became a painter instead of a dictator? Click on the link to head on over and check it out. And since you're still here, would you mind and click that like button, subscribe to our channel and ring the bell icon? Every little bit helps us out. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video, and as always, stay curious.